I'm Katie. The sunlight danced on the pristine waters as I stared at the vintage brooch in my hand, a wave-shaped silver piece with an inlaid blue stone. The note beside it read, "For the woman who showed me what flows beneath the surface." It was from Lily, once my staunchest opponent, now my trusted partner. The journey that led us to this point was a whirlwind of challenges, revelations, and triumphs. It all started on a sunny morning in Santorini, during my honeymoon. The horizon was painted a beautiful shade of pink as the sun rose, casting a warm glow over the landscape. I was sitting by the infinity pool with my husband, enjoying a peaceful moment, when my phone buzzed. I picked it up, expecting a text from a friend or family member, but instead, I saw a message that would change my life forever. Effective immediately. You're terminated. Enjoy your vacation. The words burned on my screen, and I felt a lump form in my throat. It was from Lily, the daughter of my boss, Margaret. I had worked for Margaret's company for 3 years, and during that time, I had revolutionized the way the company handled its high-stress projects. I had developed a methodology called emotional forecasting, which involved anticipating how pressure affected different team members and adjusting accordingly. Under my approach, burnout had vanished, and delivery success had jumped by 94%. Margaret had been a huge supporter of my work, but Lily, who had joined the company 2 months ago with a management certificate from a prestigious business school, saw things differently. In our first meeting, she barely looked up from her expensive watch as she declared, "We need tougher teams, not hand-holding. Real business isn't about feelings." I tried to explain that my approach wasn't soft, it was strategically human. I could prevent problems before they manifested by understanding what made people thrive under pressure. But she wasn't convinced. Over the next few weeks, I watched as Lily launched a systematic campaign against me. My team meetings were labeled excessive, my input was increasingly ignored, and my success metrics were reframed as coincidental. 2 weeks before my wedding, she called an all-hands meeting, but I wasn't invited. A sympathetic colleague texted me afterward to tell me that Lily had announced a new project management framework that was replacing mine. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by half-packed honeymoon luggage, and made a difficult choice. I wouldn't fight back in any way that would harm the company or my colleagues, but I also wouldn't protect a system that was actively rejecting me. So, I stopped. I stopped sending my morning pulse check messages that prevented team conflicts before they erupted. I stopped my practice of personally connecting with struggling team members before their performance declined. And I stopped my subtle meeting interventions that kept projects from derailing during tense client discussions. As I stared at the termination text on my honeymoon, something unexpected happened. Instead of anger or hurt, I felt a strange sense of relief. The constant battle to validate my approach had exhausted me. My husband, Tom, noticed my change in demeanor and asked, "Everything okay?" I forced a smile and replied, "Perfectly fine." But back at the office, chaos was brewing. 3 major client projects simultaneously reached critical stress points. On the Thompson account, 2 team leads with conflicting work styles had a shouting match during a client presentation, and the client immediately placed their $2.5 million project on hold. The Harris initiative spiraled when a detail-oriented analyst clashed with a big-picture strategist, and their dispute spilled into client communications, creating confusion that led the client to question the entire project foundation. And the Parker launch, the company's most prestigious project, derailed when team exhaustion led to a critical error in the final deliverable. By the 4th day of my honeymoon, Margaret had called me numerous times. When I finally answered, her voice trembled with urgency. "Katie, I don't understand what's happening. Everything was working perfectly, and now it's like the entire organization has forgotten how to function." I sat on our private terrace, watching the sunset paint the sea gold. "Your daughter removed the invisible infrastructure I built." She thought she was eliminating unnecessary coddling, but she was actually removing the foundation that everything else rested on. There was a long silence on the line. Then, Margaret said, "I need you back." Name your terms. I reminded her that I was on my honeymoon, and she quickly added, Lily was wrong to terminate you. The board has already overturned her decision. Please, Katie, we're losing clients. After hanging up, I explained everything to Tom. He listened without interrupting, then asked the question that would change everything. Do you want to go back to a place that didn't value you until everything fell apart? His question struck me like a bolt of lightning. For 3 years, I had poured my heart and soul into building something extraordinary, only to have it dismissed as unnecessary by someone who couldn't understand it. Maybe this was my chance to build something of my own, something where my name was on the door. That night, I sat on our balcony until dawn, thinking not about revenge, but about possibility. What if I could create a place where my approach was the foundation, not an afterthought? By morning, I had made my decision. When Margaret called again, I answered with newfound clarity. I'm not coming back as an employee. I'm offering you a choice. Your company can become my first client, or your competitors can. There was a moment of silence on the line, and then Margaret laughed. You know what's ironic, Katie? I've been waiting for you to realize your true value for years. I just didn't expect it would take my daughter's short-sightedness to make it happen. We spent the next hour outlining a consulting agreement that would allow me to stabilize their immediate crisis while establishing my own company, which I named Undercurrent Consulting. I would train their teams in my methodology but maintain ownership of the approach. They would become a case study for my future clients. When we returned home, Margaret had arranged an all-hands meeting. As I walked into the familiar conference room, the tension was palpable. Lily sat rigidly beside her mother, her expression unreadable. Margaret stood up to address the room. Most of you have experienced the challenges of the past 2 weeks. Today, we're announcing a strategic partnership that will address these issues and strengthen our approach going forward. She introduced me as the founder of Undercurrent Consulting, and Lily's face flushed red. After the meeting, Lily cornered me in the hallway. I want to be clear. I don't need a babysitter. Good, I replied calmly. Because I'm not here to babysit. I'm here to reveal an invisible architecture you've been trying to dismantle without seeing. Her eyes narrowed. My methods are proven in stable environments, perhaps, but high-pressure delivery requires understanding human dynamics at a level your frameworks don't address. That's just measurable, I interrupted. The past 2 weeks have measured exactly what happens when those dynamics are ignored. Something shifted in her expression. 1 month, she said finally. I'll give your approach 1 month to prove itself. Little did she know that 1 month was more than enough time to demonstrate the power of what I had built. But the real revelation would come from what I discovered during my first week back. While reviewing the project files that Lily had taken over, I noticed something strange. There were gaps in the narrative flow, and certain client meeting recaps referenced discussions that weren't documented anywhere else. Following the thread, I discovered a hidden folder buried within a seemingly unrelated archive. What I found made my heart race. Lily hadn't come to the company simply to gain experience in the family business. She had been sent by her previous employer, a massive corporate giant known for consuming smaller innovators, to investigate potential acquisition targets. Our company topped the list. Their plan was to buy low after manufacturing instability, absorb our client base, and eliminate a rising competitor. Lily was the perfect Trojan horse, someone Margaret would never suspect of corporate espionage. I knew that I couldn't rush to Margaret with this revelation. The evidence, while compelling, was still circumstantial. Moving too quickly could destroy both the mother-daughter relationship and any chance of addressing the threat strategically. Instead, I decided to use my own methodology to create change. The next morning, I arrived early to prepare for my first official consulting session with Lily. She entered precisely on time, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit that screamed corporate armor. Let's get this over with, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. Today, I began, ignoring her tone. We're going to try something different. I'm going to show you how I analyze team dynamics by having you participate in the process directly. Skepticism flashed across her face, but she nodded curtly. I pulled up the Parker Project, our most troubled account and one that Lily had been particularly interested in. According to the files, this client has unique pressure sensitivities, I explained. Their leadership responds poorly to certain communication styles. What approach would you recommend? She launched into a textbook answer about clear deliverables and accountability metrics. Interesting, I said, letting the silence hang. The lack of affirmation discomforted her, exactly as I'd intended. What? She finally asked. I notice you focus exclusively on process, not on the people implementing it. Because process is replicable and doesn't depend on emotional variables, she replied. Let's test that theory, I suggested. I'll show you two approaches with this client. One process-focused and one accounting for the human element. For the next hour, I walked her through actual case studies from the Parker account, demonstrating how understanding the client's anxiety around innovation had been key to our success. Their COO presents as confident, but actually fears being blindsided. When we adjusted our communication to address this hidden concern, project approval time decreased by 65%. Lily's expression remained neutral, but I noticed her taking unusually detailed notes. This is just basic psychology, she argued, though with less conviction than before. It's applied behavioral science in a business context, I corrected. And it's quantifiable. The approach you dismissed as touchy-feely saved this project 200 billable hours last quarter alone. By the end of the session, Lily's defensive posture had subtly shifted. She wasn't convinced, but something had penetrated her certainty. Same time tomorrow? I asked pleasantly. She nodded, gathering her materials. As she reached the door, she paused. My previous firm would consider this approach inefficient. And how would they measure that efficiency? I asked. The question hung between us. We both knew the answer. By how quickly they could strip a company's assets after acquisition. Different metrics, she finally replied before leaving. Over the next 2 weeks, I continued these sessions while quietly gathering more evidence about the acquisition plan. Each day, I exposed Lily to another facet of my methodology, always demonstrating measurable results. Simultaneously, I began implementing what I called organizational immunology, strengthening the company's structure against external threats without revealing that I knew about them. By the 3rd week, Lily started asking genuine questions during our sessions. The turning point came when a client crisis erupted during our meeting. The Parker client was threatening to pull out after receiving what they perceived as dismissive feedback from one of our team leads. Watch, I said, pulling up the communication chain. I quickly identified the escalation pattern. Normally, you'd send a carefully worded apology and offer concessions. Instead, we're going to address the underlying concern. I drafted a response acknowledging their expertise first before addressing the project details, then had our team lead call the client directly with a specific question that demonstrated we valued their insight. This seems manipulative, Lily observed. It's actually the opposite, I countered. Manipulation ignores true needs for superficial compliance. This approach recognizes and addresses the actual human concern beneath the business issue. Within an hour, the crisis had resolved. The client not only stayed, but approved the next project phase ahead of schedule. Lily sat back, visibly processing what she'd witnessed. This is what happened when you were gone, isn't it? All these hidden connections just collapsed. I nodded. Human systems appear invisible until they break. Later that evening, I received an unexpected text from Lily. Can we meet tomorrow before the office opens? When I arrived the next morning, she was already waiting. Her usual polished appearance was slightly rumpled, suggesting a sleepless night. I need to tell you something, she began, uncharacteristically hesitant. For a moment, I thought she might confess to the acquisition plan. Instead, she revealed something more personal. I failed at my last job, she said quietly. Not officially. My performance reviews were excellent, but I knew I wasn't actually succeeding. Projects completed on time, but teams fell apart afterward. Clients didn't return. I couldn't understand why. She looked up, vulnerability replacing her usual confidence. When Mom kept talking about your amazing results, I was determined to prove success came from rigid structure, not whatever it is you do. Because if you were right, then my entire approach needed rethinking. I finished for her. She nodded. Firing you wasn't just about streamlining management. It was about eliminating evidence that contradicted my worldview. The admission stunned me. While not a confession about the acquisition plot, it revealed an essential truth. Lily had been threatened not just professionally but personally by my methodology. Why tell me this now? I asked. Because yesterday I watched you solve in minutes what would have taken me weeks, if ever. And you didn't even seem to think it was special. This moment of honesty created an opening I hadn't anticipated. I decided to take a calculated risk. Lily, I know about the acquisition plan. Her face paled. I continued, the same way I know when a client is about to walk away before they say anything. I pay attention to patterns others miss. For several seconds, she sat frozen. Her career and relationship with her mother were hanging in the balance. Does Mom know? She finally asked. Not yet, and she doesn't need to, depending on what happens next. The implied choice hung between us. Lily's response surprised me. Instead of denial or defensiveness, she laughed. A short, bitter sound. The irony is I've been reconsidering whether acquisition is even the right move. What you've shown me these past weeks, it's not replicable through standard corporate integration. Exactly, I said. What makes this company valuable would be destroyed in the process of acquiring it. That morning marked the beginning of an unexpected alliance. Lily canceled her next 3 calls with her previous employer and spent a full day with me designing an alternative strategy, not for acquisition, but for partnership. When we finally presented to Margaret, we offered not a warning about corporate raiders, but an opportunity for strategic growth. The company that had planned to consume us would instead distribute our methodology through their global network, maintaining our independence while expanding our impact. Margaret studied us both with the shrewd assessment that had built her success. Something has changed between you two. Lily glanced at me before responding. Let's just say I've gained perspective on what actually drives business success. The restructured deal tripled the company's valuation within 6 months. My consulting firm expanded to serve clients worldwide, and Lily eventually joined as a partner specializing in scaling human-centered methodologies across large organizations. As I held the vintage brooch in my hand, I couldn't help but smile. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led to a place of growth, understanding, and collaboration. True power, I had learned, wasn't about defeating opponents but about transforming them into allies who truly understood your value.